Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Now, in recent days, Ukraine has intensified long-range strikes inside Russia, even reaching the Volgograd region. Now, while Russian missiles again hit Kyiv, Poland's Foreign Minister, meanwhile, Radosław Sikorski, warns that the war could last up to 3 more years, ending only when one side loses the means to carry on. In this reality, Ukraine is fighting not just on the front line, but for time, support, and global attention. We're now joined by Yevheniia Kravchuk, Deputy Chair of Ukraine's Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy. Thanks so much, and welcome to TVP World. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to get your opinion. Now, Radosław Sikorski, Poland's Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, was in our studio saying exactly those lines of these 3 years that Ukraine has, that this World War I sort of conditions. What's your reaction to that? Does Ukraine have those 3 years? And what happens when that time runs out? What else does it need?
Well, obviously, Ukraine doesn't want to fight for decades or, to have the forever war or prolonged war. But this war will stop only when Putin stops. That's obvious, because if he's not stopped, if Ukraine is not capable of defending itself, this war machine that Putin built will go further. And you probably can imagine this army that is building up in Russia, that they will not just, peacefully return home and live happily ever after. Putin will need to, refeed this Moloch, this, monster he created himself. But obviously, why we're talking about 2 or 3 years, it's also connected to what President Zelensky said about the stable finance from the partners of Ukraine, both military, but also, the civilian infrastructure in this year period. Because Russia obviously has to understand that while, it's not that it's another 3 months, Ukraine falls, or like in 6 months, we'll just wait. Russia has to understand that Ukraine is backed up in more or less predictable future. And that's why we're talking about the reparation loan, meaning that the frozen assets should work basically against Russian war machine. And at the same time, Ukraine is doing a lot to drain the war chest. Basically, so the Russian war machine would run out of money, and those soldiers who signed up the contracts, they would be not getting the money, or there would be not enough of resources to both, for example, pay pensions in Russia and produce more weapons and more drones and missiles.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, as you said, this is a war machine that is currently still churning out what it can. I mean, even with those new sanctions on oil, even with new, let's say, methods to try and stop, frozen assets are still not being used. That's still something floating around in Europe. We've been talking about that for a long time. But realistically, now, especially in the winter months, do you think that Russia in any way is being sort of slowed down at this point, or is there still enough to push on? Because we're talking about vulnerability here, and it seems that is Russia really as vulnerable as we say that it is?
Well, if we speak about Russian economy, it's mostly now on the military side. They do produce a lot of stuff for the army, but at the same time, the normal economy size is shrinking, and normal economy will also meaning the fossils, the refineries, and they are getting less money for the export, and they basically Russia. What do they have to offer to the world? Just fossils, oil, products made from oil, so petrol, gasoline, and these resources are also are being targeted, meaning that with Ukraine is targeting the refineries, the storages, the pipelines, so anything that brings money to basically to Russian budget. And of course, our partners can do not the same with the actual attacks, but with the sanctions. And you were talking about how painful it is, the sanctions from United States to Lukoil, because Lukoil is now actually closing and again shrinking in different parts of the world. So indeed, it is a long run, right? So it's the war of attrition. And obviously, if we see Russia, of course, Russia has allies, North Korea, Iran, and so on and so forth. But if we see who stands on the normal side of the history, we see United States, we see European Union, which is huge economy altogether, and it's the normal part of the world basically has to do this final push to basically knock out Russian economy, because economy wins the war at the long run.
Mm-hmm. Right, and there's still things to work out on that. I mean, you spoke of attrition, Yevheniia. I want to ask you, because one key point right now on the front line, if we zoom in to the city of Pokrovsk, I mean, this is a town that has been under siege. We have conflicting reports that we're hearing. I mean, this matters, because the linchpin that it is to Kramatorsk, to Donetsk. Tell us a bit more about how you think Ukrainian forces are holding up there. If that goes, any terms of updates on that situation these last days?
Well, again, I'm a politician. I'm not a military representative or a military expert, so I will not comment anything on the operations. But what I can say that it is one of the villages or the cities that are under severe attack of Russian Federation for many months, and still, it's we're talking about the second largest army is it takes months for different, they do not even take the villages, they just completely erase the villages in Donbass. It's not when they say we're deliberating this village or that city, it's basically they're destroying it to ashes. But still they were not successful, and we did have different units that were put to this region, and the Ukrainian flag was re-put on the administrative building of Pokrovsk just a few days ago. But again, this is military operation. Sometimes it's better not to say too much. But of course, the chief of command and President Zelensky is the president, and the chief is paying a lot of attention to this region.
Right, but then at the same, let me ask you more then of a political, social question in that regard. If we have this assault on Pokrovsk, which may hold still, it may fall into the hands of the Russians. I remember we were also looking at Bakhmut some time ago. That was also more of a symbol as well. We have increasing attacks on Kyiv, energy infrastructure as we're entering the winter, a shortage of supplies. How is that impacting generally the civilian population, the morale? What is the mood there on the ground in Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine right now, looking at this quite dire situation around them?
People, that live in Ukraine, it's not the first winter with the blackouts. Of course, Russians want to have the humanitarian catastrophe. That's obvious. Basically, targeting big cities such as Kyiv or Kharkiv or Dnipro, especially those who are on the left bank of Dnipro, they want to basically make conditions unbearable. Right now in Kyiv, we do have the shortage of electricity, so we have the schedule every day, what hours the electricity is being cut off. But again, for example, businesses, they bought the generator or received humanitarian aid if it's school or hospital in 22, 23, 24. So now in 2025, we're more ready than if these attacks would appear like 2 years ago. Again, the biggest threat is if the heat, the heating system of the big cities will be damaged, or I don't believe completely damaged, yet destroyed, because when you have Kyiv is a 4 million people, right, living mostly in residential apartments. So if Russians, if we don't get enough of air defense to defend the heating stations, then it could be a humanitarian catastrophe. That's the aim. But I still believe that with these additional Patriots that we receive from Germany, but other new technologies that actually Ukrainians are developing against drones, against Shaheds, will be able to survive this winter without the catastrophe. But honestly, Russia wants to have a humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And just briefly at the end, I'm just curious also about your view. We have more boasting by Vladimir Putin of trying to build new nuclear-capable weapons, potentially even restarting testing of nuclear weapons. President Trump also doing the same. I mean, there are nuclear weapons stationed in Belarus near the border there. When you hear this kind of rhetoric and you hear this kind of speech, what does that impact on the Ukrainians, and what does Ukraine feel about all these? Does this make more, let's say, of a pressing feel? You're so close, you're in this war. What about this nuclear rhetoric and all this? Just briefly.
Look, we had these coming, in 22. I mean, these discussions in 2022. Then Oreshnik. Then, let me be clear: the Zaporizhzhia power plant and the occupation of Zaporizhzhia power plant, nuclear power plant, is a great threat in the terms of nuclear danger. Because if Russia will keep the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it will be forever a threat to the whole region. And it is quite close to many countries. But it's difficult to answer this question. We constantly live in the full-scale aggression with missiles, fightings. So I think Ukrainians are less scared of anything in this world.
Right. And I think this is the thing, as you said, you see that aggression on a daily basis. Unfortunately, this is the reality. So we hope that the resilience continues. We'll close it there. Look, thank you so much, Yevheniia Kravchuk. Really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us, but stay tuned. There's much more on TVP World, so don't go away.